Hello and welcome to this week's Why Football podcast with me, Michael Dryden and Etches Adokru. I'm very pleased to say this week we are joined by Calum Gaughan. Calum is a digital producer at Tottenham Hotspur and is on the podcast today to tell us all about his life in football media to date. So, hello Calum, how are you?
Hiya guys, I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Good to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's good to have you, mate.
So I thought we'd just dive straight in then, just a bit of background to you for the listeners. So we know you are at Spurs currently, but what about prior to Spurs? Can you tell us a bit about your background, Calum?
Yeah, sure. So I guess in terms of sports media, started with a master's in broadcast journalism, and then off the back of that, did some unpaid work, mainly around diversity within the sports media. But also for a company called Refresh Sports, who had contracts with about 3 players to do the social media stuff, but also the likes of the PFA to do just random bits with them. So it wasn't a every day, but there'd be obviously events and stuff that players and the PFA wanted covering. So doing events with them, that became part-time work. And then from there, applied for a job at Crystal Palace.
Yeah.
In their media team, doing mainly like video editing, stuff like that. And then from then applied for a job at Spurs.
All right, cool. So but your unpaid work. What sort of work did you do with them with Refresh?
So initially, the unpaid bit was like researching the amount of black journalists I think that went to Euro.
Oh, cool.
2016, 2018.
2016,
just to research the numbers for that, because they were making like a big brochure on paper essentially on the diversity within sports media, because the man that owns that company, Leon Mann, is quite big within diversity.
Yeah, I actually followed him before learning of that from you and previously doing this podcast, so that's quite an interesting link. In terms of the social media accounts, so I find that interesting. Can you tell us a bit more about that? I don't know how much you worked on it, but I find it interesting. We all follow loads of footballers on Twitter or Instagram or whatever, and we're always seeing, obviously, the corporate side, the sponsorship side, but obviously they're also probably got access to it themselves. So maybe how did a company like Leon's actually handle it? Do they look after the whole thing, or is it kind of like does the player still have access to it? I don't really know how it works.
It's different for every different players, really, depending on how much they want to be involved in it. Some of them aren't really bothered, and often you'll find that their brother or someone close to them and their family's running it. A few of them, few players at Spurs have that. Or there was in some cases, they don't run it all, they don't touch it, that they're not even aware of the tweets that go out or anything like that. Whereas other players, I'd say one of the ones we were involved in, called Yannick Balassi, he quite likes to engage with fans on social and do his own videos and do his just run it how we would, I guess, just doing Insta stories of him listening to music in his car.
He would just do that. So he would just do that off his own back. He wouldn't.
he'd use social media how we would, just off his own back. And I've noticed at Everton at the moment, he does a lot of shirt giveaways just off his own back and stuff, because he just enjoys interacting with fans and stuff. But what we do for him was more create videos for certain things. So he did a mini football event with his own 3-a-side kind of street football rules. So he'd get us to come in and film that and produce stuff for that. So his was less everyday tweeting, more creating bigger videos for him.
That must have been crazy, because I know Yannick Balassi's got a lot of skills.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he's a street footballer.
Side note, where is Balassi now?
He's back at Everton.
Oh, of course, because he went on loan.
He was on
the
loan,
radar for so long.
He was at Sporting Lisbon on loan, I think, towards the end of last season. But he's back at Everton now.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's because we always see, as you said, at the most elite level especially, you will get players who have their social media accounts handled entirely because they have such following, and it probably is good for their image and their brand to tweet heavily. You also see a lot of the ones who don't take that up go a bit rogue. Go very rogue. like
Yeah,
Bernardo Silva. I don't know. Obviously, your role within that was very different. But I'd be interested. Yeah, I'd be interested if you guys had any experience with how it went very badly wrong.
Not wrong. Like I've obviously seen examples, but I can't remember who it was. There was the tweet where it said, "Can you put something like this?" And then the tweet, and they've obviously copied and pasted that straight into Twitter without
Oh yeah, I've seen
removing
that so many times,
the
man.
"Can you put something like this" line. Obviously, I think was it Julian Lescott that had issues with tweeting pictures of cars or something from his pocket, which was a bit. I don't know. There was something weird along those lines. But I think you can tell. I mean, fans are a bit in denial about that kind of stuff. But like obviously, Saint Maximan's online presence is
Yeah, I
very
was about
good.
to say
His
that,
Twitter
Maxwell.
is
Yeah,
very
he's
good.
quite a jokes guy.
But I'm convinced. I bet he barely speaks English. I haven't seen an interview of him doing anything in English. So I'd be amazed if he's whacking out all this banter on Twitter.
And he's got
So
perfect grammar, better than mine.
I'd be amazed if I actually mentioned this to a Newcastle fan I was out for drinks with recently, and they were not happy that I was like shattering the illusion. But I'd honestly be amazed if he's running that social media.
Yeah, because there's so many football clubs now as well that have like these quite funny accounts that, and you just wonder, like, obviously it's different because their organization, you wouldn't know who runs the account anyway, but at the same time, like, like there's such a drive to be that funny account, to be the funniest account.
A lot of German teams seem to have, like, their English speaking versions of their accounts seem to just be there to take the piss, really.
Yeah,
it seems to be there, like it seems to how they operate. But I think it does gain them a lot more followers than it otherwise would. So it is definitely a tactic that
absolutely
can be employed.
So yeah, Calum, moving on to your time at Palace. So what was your role there, or roles?
So I came in as like someone that's meant to like organise the production side of things, but admittedly I wasn't brilliant at that, to be fair. And then I started editing videos, and I just kind of became a video editor because I taught myself on YouTube a lot how to do different techniques and just watch a lot of tutorials about different video editing, and just kind of became quite good at it. So I just became a video editor there, which was good. It was good fun.
Which is mad because it seems like it looks well hard. Like you see some of these videos I put together, it looks well hard.
Yeah, it's quite, if you don't know what you're doing, it's quite the like timeline and stuff's quite intimidating. Like there's loads of layers. Like my housemate was watching me edit on Saturday for the Matt Doherty announcement, and he looked at it and he was so intimidated. He was like, "How? There's so much stuff going on there." I was like, "Nah, once you know what you're doing, it's just chopping and changing. It's not it's not too bad."
Fair enough.
But I have a lot of questions about the Calum Doherty one, which I'll get to in a second.
The Matt Doherty. Yeah, that went down well.
So what big videos did you worked in or involved with it? Palace, any particular players that you worked with in that regard, or big signings?
So yeah, I did like the Max Meyer announcement video, which at the time was big, but obviously Hodgson hasn't played him at all since, so no one really cares anymore.
Yeah.
But I was like, like we did like a documentary on Wan-Bissaka. I was involved in that, but I didn't lead on it or anything. But obviously, I was learning. It was my first year working in football. So Crystal Palace is definitely a good place to learn and get hands on, because it's quite a smaller team and like a smaller club. So you're quite involved in everything that everyone does. There's because you need to be. So there's no like, oh, this other department's handling that. You're kind of just across everything. So you learn on the job, and that's kind of how I fell into video editing. It was like I did loads of different bits and then ended up being quite good at that. So picked that up for myself, really. But no, it's quite a close club, Crystal Palace. So
yeah, I was going to say,
I enjoyed my time there.
Yeah, leading on from that, so how important, I suppose we'll get onto this with the Spurs later, this kind of comparison, but how important was like media at Palace? Obviously they're a smaller Premier League club than Spurs. Was it a big priority?
No, I wouldn't say it was a priority. There's a massive difference in how it is at Spurs to Palace, because it's a massive like money generator at Spurs, because all the partners, they want your brand, like visibility on channels, because you have millions and millions of followers, and it's a good advertising space for them to be involved with. Whereas Palace, it was a lot smaller, so they were only just starting to look to get into that kind of element. There was a few pieces of like branded content, but it wasn't. I wouldn't say there was an overarching.
I would have assumed that would be a priority for every club.
I think it was a priority, but
Yeah,
obviously at that lower down in the Premier League, it's harder to build and it's harder to sell to people.
yeah,
So it's definitely a priority for everyone. Like you see eToros like across like every Premier League club, they love branding through that, and
yeah,
there's certain companies that seem to go to every single club. And there was an element of commercial input at Palace, but not nowhere near a level at Spurs. And it was kind of just it meant you were able to do more of just what you wanted. Like I think at Palace you're
yeah,
allowed to
yeah,
as we said with the German channels, kind of take the piss a bit more and be a bit roguer because commercial partners and stuff aren't involved, and you can kind of have a bit more fun with it. But I
yeah.
guess
Makes
the
sense.
the,
Yeah,
the end the end objective is always to grow your reach and to attract more fans to the club, which in the end will generate more revenue.
yeah, absolutely. I think we discussed and we chatted earlier about how it's at a club like Palace, because you've got that relegation looming. Um, it's a very different beast for the media team. Like you're actually like it's a bit ominous for you if you if they get relegated and see if they get promoted. Whereas someone like Tottenham are kind of fixed into the elite, aren't they? In that sense.
Yeah, definitely. Like we spoke about this previously before, but obviously there's a massive. It's a weird working in football media is a weird job because your job can be affected so much by other people that you have no control over. But like more so than I think any other job
Yeah,
anywhere
absolutely.
really.
Yeah,
Because yeah, as I said, if Palace got relegated that season that I was there, I would have lost my job no matter how good or bad I was doing my job. Or I give the example that someone gave to me before is that if you were at Bournemouth or Leighton Orient when they were together in League Two,
yeah,
Leighton Orient ended up in the conference, or Bournemouth ended up in the Premier League.
yeah,
So the guy
absolutely.
at
Yeah,
Bournemouth would have probably quadrupled his wages, whether he was doing a good or
yeah. I
bad
mean,
job.
they stayed up the last
Just
game of the season, but I think it was a draw against
yeah,
Bolton. I don't know why
exactly.
I know that, but I do. And then probably a few years later, they're in the Premier League, and head of
Yeah,
media is probably
exactly.
has got a completely different life. Like,
Well, it's a
it's,
much better job. It's a much more attractive job, much better, much more money in the club, and even at Spurs, like it's there's still obviously not as big as relegation, but the gap between the Champions League and Europa League, like our bonuses were reflected in the fact that the team got to the Champions League final at the end of that season, even though I joined at the end of January, and I can safely say I had nothing to do with them getting to the Champions League final, but
yeah,
I was still financially rewarded for it. So
take the credit,
it
Calum.
is
Take the
weird.
credit, mate. Take the credit.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I was there at Ajax, so I gave a
You were
little
there.
speech, you know. But yeah, we're filming pitside at the Ajax game, but yeah, you're financially rewarded or financially punished for stuff that is completely out of your control.
Yeah. Was there objectives at Palace as well in terms of
Um,
like social media following or like building the brand in different ways, views,
yeah,
impressions,
there
that sort of
was.
thing?
It didn't really. It didn't really filter down to me. Obviously, I was starting out in my career, so like the
Mm.
objectives weren't particularly set out to me. My job was just to do as yeah, just gain as much growth as possible. But obviously, higher up, they would have set numbers and set targets that they were aiming for.
Yeah, cool. And what the players at Palace? Was there anyone who kind of shied away from the kind of media obligations, and did anyone absolutely love it?
They were all right, to be fair. I mean, none of them love it. To be fair, none of them. No, they always moan. That the job of a footballer is to moan when you get them to do these things. That would be their first instinct, no matter what. Even if they enjoy it whilst they're doing the filming, they'll moan when you ask them to do it. That's just part of the job. But no, none of them were too bad in terms of like massively avoiding it either. But yeah, I don't think there's anyone that really loves doing extra media stuff with us when they could
Mm.
just go home.
Because what you were saying about the fans kind of being deluded in a sense about how these players are, kind of feeds into that. Like, as much as a lot of these players might actually be really good people and quite funny guys and things like that, like at the end of the day, like this is an elite level of sport, and they're there to train to actually compete at that level. And so, as much as they might want to get involved in media, like that is very much a secondary thought. But then,
Yeah,
I
of
suppose
course, it's
somewhere like
secondary.
Spurs, you would have that kind of actual obligation for certain players and
Yeah,
certain
well,
sponsors.
to be honest, like football's changed so much that it is now really part of their job, like to
Yeah,
do all this media stuff because it brings
Yeah, 100%.
it brings all the money in. But because that's so new, like even my job, like 10 years ago, would have sounded absolutely ridiculous. Like, why on earth would you need that? And it's grown so much to a point where this is obviously it's secondary, but it still is a massive part of their job.
Yeah.
Because it generates revenue for the club and for themselves. So it is fast becoming, for the younger players, they just kind of accept it now. They're brought up within this kind of social media world, so they just know that's what's required of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was the media for players like Wilfred Zaha particularly sought after at Palace?
What, by like external media?
By external media, but like more like fans. So, okay, if you have a video with, let's say, Balassi when he was there compared to Zaha, would it be Zaha's media that would be more popular generally, or would it not really make much of a difference?
No, you always have every club. You have players that obviously attract more numbers, not just within your fan base, but beyond it. And that is quite a big thing for for Palace, that they were trying to grow their fan base and trying to attract people that aren't in South London, because they don't have a massive like international fan base. So obviously Wilfred Zaha is quite a well-known Premier League player, so that you would try and use his status to elevate it, because some fans internationally will support a team based on their YouTube channel or based on one video that they saw just off the back of it. So
yeah, if you do want to grow in the Premier League, which is so difficult anyway, you need to build your brand, your revenue. So it does make a lot of sense.
yeah, that was one of the main things of Palace, trying to branch out of obviously keeping the South London roots, but trying to in terms of gaining fans, how to branch out of it. And they do a good job. Like they followed Wilf to the Ivory Coast when he first went back, because obviously he didn't get called up for England. So when he first got called up for the Ivory Coast, a cameraman and the producer went with him and followed him around. It was a really good documentary, to be fair, which done quite well. Yeah.
What made you decide to leave Palace for Spurs, and how did the opportunity arise for you?
So the opportunity arose because a woman I worked with during my time with Leon, she just sent me. She worked for Women in Sport at the time, whose job it was to get more women into sport. So she probably shouldn't have sent me the link for the job, but she did. She just letting me know that they were hiring, because I think the person that was there before me had left. So yeah, literally just an online job application, online job advert that I applied for with my CV and cover letter. Pretty standard, as everyone does.
Yep.
And then went through a number of interviews where I kind of blagged it, because as I said at Palace, I was a video editor. I didn't actually know how to use those professional cameras and learn how to film. But when they asked me if I did at Spurs, I just said yes, and then taught myself how to do it, because the final interview was setting up a camera interview. So I had to blag it, and luckily I got away with it. So I've kind of taught myself. I've just taught myself on the job ever since then, and I'm decent at filming now. Well, it was no player came in, but it was just set up an interview as if someone was going to come in with the lighting and the camera and everything. And so I just spent the week before that just googling it, and even at Palace, obviously I didn't want to tell anyone that I was looking to leave, but I'd talk to the cameraman. I'd be like, so what does this do? And what does that do? And trying to get tips off them without making it too obvious that I was actually doing it for a different job. So yeah, the reason I left Palace was it's just a massive step up. As talked about, going from essentially flirting with relegation to, at the time they're in the Champions League quarterfinals, moving into the new stadium. Financially, it was a much better pay for me as well, and it just seemed like a natural step up, which is obviously nice to be able to do. It shows you're doing something right.
What I was going to say was, you must have ice running through your veins. It's going into an interview room thinking, I've done a bit of YouTube, asked a few friends, and then here I am. Fair play to you, mate.
You got to back yourself, didn't you?
So in terms of the differences between Spurs and Palace, you guys touched on it earlier, that Palace are, sometimes security in the Premier League is their main aim, whereas Spurs are a much more established club. Are there any other differences, mostly in the media department, between the two clubs?
I'd say we do a lot more at Spurs. There's a lot more workload because of all the commercial partners. I think there's a lot more money involved in just everything that happens. There's a lot more external media requests. So there's whilst at Palace there was one one full-time, one part-time person that looked after external media. There's 3 or 4 full-time workers that look after all the requests from like Sky and all that kind of stuff and deal with press releases and things. And it's a lot more structured, a lot more organized. There's a lot more like layers to the organization, and you probably have a lot more approval processes for things, but that just comes with there being more money and more partners involved, because there's contracts and stuff you have to stick to. So it's much more formal, I'd say. But then you kind of there's more to it. Like you kind of see why you're doing everything. You know, you see the money that's coming in, you see the deals that are being made. So it makes a lot more sense.
No, fair enough. So when you talk about there's more projects to do and stuff, are there any specific ones at Spurs you'd like to mention?
Yeah. So like at Spurs, different to Palace. So every month we get about an hour or 2 hours with 4 players. And the job is to come up with just running content strands that you can do with the 4 players throughout that. And part of when I first joined Spurs, I had to get, I think it was 2 million views in my first 3 months in like a video that I'd produced. So obviously that was quite intimidating coming into it at first, because I'd got nowhere near those numbers at Palace, and I was just thinking, oh God. So every little video I did, I was kind of tallying them up. I had a little note where I was adding them together in case I was scraping the barrel, in case I was only just getting to 2 million. But then the first content capture that we did, I got a ball cannon in for a series that we called How's Your Touch? We had, luckily, to be fair, I had Sonny in it. We had Sonny, Ericsson, Gazaniga, can't remember the 4th player now. But so the 4 of them were just being tasked with controlling the ball out of this ball cannon within an area. And it was like Sonny makes videos funny, but it was a good concept anyway. And that got about 14 million views or something stupid across all platforms. So as soon as I released that, I was coasting for the rest of the 3 months. I was like, I've smashed it.
Feet on the table after that one.
Yeah, I was flying.
Good question for you, and for Dryden as well. How's your touch? If the ball cannon came down, would you be able to do it?
To be fair, I tested myself out at the time. It wasn't a up and down. It was like a straight into you, and then you had to control it.
Mid-drift.
So you had to. So like into like your knee area, and then you have to kill it within a certain area. So if it went out the square, you don't get any points.
Oh, I've seen that
one touch
before. Yeah.
If you do it in one touch, you get 3 points. 2 or 1 or more touch, you get 1 point. And obviously, I had to test it out before the players arrived. I thought I was decent. I was all right. It is difficult though. It fizzes it at you. Proper. It's a ball cannon, so you can imagine it gets a bit of pace.
I'd be absolutely shaking, sweating.
But no, it was good fun, because obviously the players mess about with it. It's like, oh, that was it. Lorente was the other one. And
so how do you choose the players? Was it like rotation that you do every week?
It's rotation. So someone's job at the club to organise what appearances players do, and they try to limit them to 1 a month in terms of those proper appearances. And we at Spurs TV are just part of that appearance list. So there's other stuff for partners or PR appearances, and there's loads of different aspects within the club that require appearances. So we're just one little part of it. So there's someone that manages what players do what throughout the month.
I imagine if you'd got Foyth, Gazaniga, Alderweireld, and Vertonghen.
Well, this is the thing you do. You do get different sets of 4. But obviously, the first one was good. But we followed it up with different ones, and I mean, to be fair, at that level, the players are also good. It's pretty impressive.
You'd expect them to.
Yeah, definitely.
Are there any other projects you'd like to touch on? Actually, no, I have a question for you. So Amazon, how did that work for the media team? I haven't watched the documentary yet, but how did that work with you guys? Did you interact at all, or?
They obviously it was quite a big deal for the club. Like there was a lot of money involved, and it was obviously going to be quite a highly promoted series and talked about. So it took over that season, to be fair. My direct boss, who's usually just involved in Spurs TV, was actually taken away to like manage the Amazon project.
Oh, wow.
So he just didn't really work with us for the whole season. His main focus just Amazon, and other people's jobs were definitely doubled in workload because of it. Just managing, especially at the beginning, trying to embed them within the team. under Maurizio. There's a lot of like politics and sorting it all out, and obviously even us, we'd be a bit weirded out by people filming us all day. So for the players and the staff to get used to it at first, it's a bit weird, I think, for them.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
But yeah, it's different for us because they were at every filming session that we do, they'd be there as well. So we always had to think about them and everything we did throughout the season. But once they got into like a flow of things and they were all settled, it wasn't too bad. But I think there was definitely a bedding in period. But
yeah, because I know it's a very different skill, but on Sunderland Till I Die, that's a different kind of context as well. But there were some players that just didn't want to be on camera, like refused to be on camera, didn't want to be involved, because of what happened with the club and just the invasion of privacy. So I suppose with Spurs, they've got a bigger obligation, but like you've got to think like these players do play in front of millions every week, but it still must be quite nervy, intimidating. Like
yeah,
but
obviously the dressing room and stuff.
Yeah,
the dressing room and stuff is different. I mean, for them, I think the whole thing is not what are they getting out of it. They're putting their life out there for everyone to see, and could potentially be made to look bad, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
They just wanted reassurances as well. So, but no, I think in the end, I think they're all happy with it. They all went to the premiere a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's come out quite well. It's quite interesting. I think they'll probably look back on it in a few years and laugh. But also the new signings, so like Pierre Højbjerg and Joe Hart were at the premiere, and they were just like, I've learned more about the players straight away now. Yeah, they know a lot more about the squad straight away.
Yes. Speaking on signings, so I remember when Tottenham signed Ndombele, I think, or maybe it was another player, I can't remember who it was, but the amount of thought and detail that goes into these transfer videos now is quite mad. So we touched on the Matt Doherty one earlier with I'm an Arsenal fan, as people in the podcast know. So the whole deleting the Arsenal tweets really made me laugh. I thought that was really, really good.
Yeah,
because they're quite interesting. Like, I think, what was he tweeting? Like, I love Arsenal or something.
So he obviously used to be a massive Arsenal fan, so he had lots of Arsenal tweets. But yes, it's quite funny. But you need the player to buy into that kind of stuff as well to do that. I'd say it wasn't my idea. I've been at home with my after my knee surgery. I've been working from home, so I haven't really been too involved. But the one of the social boys came up with the idea and posed it to him, and then he was happy to do it. And then I got sent all the footage on the Saturday, and I just edited it together, as well as like we did a like a graphic-y led announcement video as well. But that was like a follow-up piece, the Arsenal delete Twitter thing, and it just absolutely took off. Everyone loved it. But I think it was a good one because it was either that or every single thing that we put on with Matt Doherty, all the replies would be, yeah, but he's an Arsenal fan. Yeah, but he's an Arsenal fan. So so you just put that to bed, and I think a lot of people thought it was embarrassing, but I think the majority of people saw the light-hearted, funny side of it because that's what it is really. It's not that in football, it's not that big a deal if you used to support a team. You now support a team that pays you and that you play for. So. Yeah. I think fans think it matters. Fans think it matters a lot more than it actually does.
Yeah, emotions get pretty high. I think if you mention Jack Colback to Dryden, he'll start crying.
Yeah.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah. So park that one. Yeah, park that one down. Got a lot to say on that one.
When Tottenham's record signers and Ndombele, for a record signing video, do you even go push the bar even further, so to speak, for videos like that, or?
To be honest, and I edited it, so I can probably say this. Our Ndombele announcement video was not very good. So Spurs had no, honestly, it wasn't. I'm my biggest critic, and I was disappointed in it. Spurs hadn't signed someone for like 18 months at the beginning of that transfer window, and obviously it was a big thing that Spurs were just not signing people. So I'd actually filmed this whole other announcement where I'd got an old dusty book, a Spurs book, and got it all dusty and blowing the covers off it, and it opened to reveal like transfer announcement protocols and kind of taking a piss about how long it had been since we'd signed someone, and like we kind of forgot and we were a bit rusty, and that was going to be Ndombele. But because we signed Jack Clark before Ndombele. Ndombele wasn't our first signing, and then
Uh,
we signed Jack Clark the day before,
hmm.
and Jack Clark's obviously not a record signing, and he was going back out on
Yeah.
loan, so it didn't feel right to go as big for that signing. So we just kind of got stuck like the day before with no ideas and just did a very generic video for Ndombele in the end, which I don't think the fans particularly rated. And but yeah, so we got a bit stuck on that one in the end.
Yeah, sorry, Tanguy. I think I'll just send that out to him. But in terms of, do any particular players, so we've touched on the record signing beforehand, do certain players dominate certain markets? I have a clue as to who might.
Yeah, well, obviously for us, it's Sonny is a massive one.
Yeah.
Him and Son, he's obviously huge in not just Asia, around the world, but in Asia in particular, especially Korea. The amount of Korean fans that go to Tottenham games now, and well, not now, but obviously previously when crowds were allowed, and the amount of like online views and followers that Spurs get from Korea is massive, and it's all because of Sonny, because he's their captain. He's really like the poster boy over there, and he's huge. Like we now have a Korean Spurs like social channels and stuff to capitalize on that,
Oh,
which
wow.
which like an agency in Korea runs. We do the same so we have a Spanish and Portuguese speaking channel as well, which you'll know a lot of clubs do that as well. So Liverpool will have an Egyptian one, obviously to capitalize on Salah, who's similar levels to Sonny in Africa and especially Egypt. I guess Mane would be the same in Senegal, and obviously they have a number of just those players that from those countries just become like huge, just beyond the clubs. Like people follow the player. So if Sonny moved, I imagine a lot of those Korean fans wouldn't stick with Tottenham. They'd follow Sonny. So a lot of fans nowadays do actually support players, which was probably a bit alien to us when we were younger, but especially for international fans, I think that's quite a big thing now.
Yeah, and you always wonder whether or not there's a lot of the kind of thought process in the signing. Is that so? Obviously, Son is an immense player anyway, but then does that go in the transfer process? We saw like Minamino's went to Liverpool, also from Asia. You do wonder, like, does the brand that they bring or like the fan base that can potentially generate and like the views and stuff factors in the transfer? It was difficult. It's different.
I'd be very surprised.
I'd
be very surprised if the commercial element ever came into it. I think it's something that you look to capitalize on once it's there.
Yeah.
But I think at most clubs, the commercial element stays well away from getting involved in transfers or anything like that.
Maybe I'm skeptical.
The football side are very much left to their own wants and desires, and we would try and obviously mirror them and try and like make the most out of whatever decisions they make. But we certainly wouldn't get involved in who they should sign as a commercial side of the business.
Where you mentioned the Spurs media presence in different languages and stuff, is there any specific place where Spurs are looking to grow? So, would it be, I don't know what Spurs are like in Africa at the moment, or
the US,
maybe
for example.
North America. Yeah, North America. Yeah, it's a good example.
Yeah, well, I think at the moment it's China and Asia. I think China's a big one for a lot of clubs, just because it's obviously a huge market. But I think Spurs definitely want to capitalize on the influence of Sonny, whilst the Asian markets, whilst he's opening the Asian market to Spurs. Obviously, on top of that, the main shirt sponsor is AIA, which is a predominantly Asian company. So there's a lot of links to Asia at the moment with Spurs. But in terms of like Africa, not really, because it's hard to go in there without a player to kind of pin it on. Obviously Sergio Aurier is of African descent, but he hasn't got the big massive appeal that we can necessarily launch a campaign in Ivory Coast or anything. But we don't currently have a French speaking channel. But we have a lot of South American players, so we have the Spanish and the Portuguese speaking channels, which we obviously focus on the likes of Lucas Moura and Lo Celso recently, Lamela, Foyth, Gazaniga. there's quite a few. Davinson Sanchez as well. There's quite a lot of Spanish and Portuguese speaking players within the squad, so we definitely have a big focus on those regions as well. So when I did the recent kit launch for next year's kit, we actually got all the players to speak in their native languages for the kind of bits. We did like a career story, but we got them speaking their native languages. So then we had bespoke pieces to send to those channels from the Celso in Spanish and Lucas in Portuguese and Korean and Sunny in Korean to give fans in those areas obviously some native speaking content, which obviously performs better than subtitle stuff.
No, fair. What are your thoughts on the kit, actually, now that you mentioned it?
I have to love it. I love it.
Good answer. Good answer.
No, I do. I quite like it. I quite like it.
I've just had to Google it, actually. Yeah. I haven't seen it. I don't mind it at all. Just thought I'd give my opinion on that, but yeah, not bad.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, thanks for sharing.
If we're talking about kits, the England kits are very nice.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that.
Definitely.
And all the training wear and stuff that they put out of it are very decent.
Yeah, I discussed pre-ordering an England kit yesterday, but I didn't get around to it. So yeah, it might be a task for this evening.
So to finish up, Calum and Etches, I thought we'd have a brief discussion. Well, it's a brief discussion mainly on a lot we've discussed on football image for clubs and players, and we've discussed a lot for the clubs about how important that is for a club and a player's career.
It's definitely a factor because obviously the player imagery is spoken about quite a lot because being able to use a player's image, as we've spoken about for Spurs targeting different geographical areas, is massive. Like if we wanted to target Korea but didn't actually have the right to use Sonny's imagery without say paying him or his agent every single time, then it would really hamper that area of the business, and it would create a much more difficult situation. And I know like Ronaldo's stuff is big on like his celebration, and I think like the people like Dybala and things like that. I think it's a lot bigger in foreign football, like agents and stuff having investment in player imagery. But yeah, it's obviously huge because everywhere you go, you see football players on the side of buses, and you don't think that potentially they're getting paid every time that happens, or the club's getting paid every time that happens, or whoever owns it. So with all this media that goes around, that there is a lot of money in that kind of stuff. In terms of their like general presence, I mean, in terms of them as a person, it's obviously massive within football, not necessarily for fans or stuff like that. But when directors of football and scouts and stuff are researching players, they will always look into their personality as much as they look into their footballing ability. So how they put themselves across
and I suppose
is always quite a big thing.
Yeah, and I suppose without obviously the Sun thing, the following they already have as a player and that particular personality and image can only be beneficial for a club if they've got a massive image and a massive following, say in Asia like Sun has, because obviously that brings along the media side, which we've discussed.
Yeah, of course. But if you have a reputation as, like, I believe I've heard people talk about Jack Grealish and just the way he is with Sky, safe to say, or the people that work in the media and stuff. He's known to stick around for as long as you need him and not be a hassle at all. And I think that kind of shows his personality as a person, and it would encourage someone to go out and buy him and bring him into a club because you think he's going to bring the right ethos to your club. Whereas if you know someone is difficult at certain things, it obviously puts you off on things. Maybe it'd be difficult within the footballing environment as well. If he's difficult with media, he could be difficult with more things. So
yeah, absolutely.
Football is very much a reputation. Well, I guess all sports are, but like your reputation is massive, and that can be beneficial or detrimental, I guess.
Yeah. Do you think a bad player image can actually affect a club? So someone like when Terry had issues in the past in his personal life and the media, do you think that can actually affect the club negatively?
Well, yeah, of course. I think like Liverpool got a lot of criticism for when they wore the T-shirts in defence of Suarez, didn't they? And they've I think the Christian Perso actually recently apologized. I don't know if it's Perso, sorry, but one of the higher executives within Liverpool recently publicly apologized to Everett about that incident because it was still like a tarnish. Like everyone still had a go at them for doing that, and it didn't reflect well on them at the time it was controversial, but then when things came to light, it looked even worse. So it definitely having a player that causes controversy, it makes the club react, and then they want to be on the right side of history once things fall into place. So obviously look like they did the right thing, and it's hard because you don't want to assume the worst of your player and you want to protect them, but then if it proves they have done something wrong and you've gone all out to defend them, you look as guilty as them, and so it's quite difficult. So it does put a club in a difficult place. So it's obviously something they'd want to avoid if looking at incoming people and they brought a lot of media storm with them. I'm sure it would raise question marks.
Yeah, another point as well. So this is a bit left field, but when the Champions League final happened, Ander Herrera gave an interview where he was really honest about why PSG lost. I don't know if you guys saw it.
Yeah,
I got that.
And fans really liked it. And the question I had were, are interviews by players, are they ever analysed by media teams or how they can improve? Because for me, the Ander Herrera one went down so well because it wasn't robotic and, those football manager style answers where it's like, we didn't win today, we'll try harder next week, I'm gutted. It was a bit different.
Yeah.
And it's more of a case of, for the players at Tottenham or at Palace, is there any feedback on how they can improve or grow / mend their potential image or how they interview?
I think when players first come through, there definitely is. There's definitely media training. I remember early on when I joined the club, we got Jeff Shreves to come down to the training centre and give a fake interview with Oliver Skip, just to train him up a little bit, and then Jeff Shreves gave him some tips off the back of that. But I don't think there's like really mentoring. Like different players have different styles. Like Danny Rose is always quite honest in his post-match interviews. Dele's had a number of ones where he, especially towards the beginning of the season, where he came out after the game and said that we weren't good enough, there's no excuses, and was quite open and honest about the team not being good enough at the time. And as a media team, like, we don't mind it. It's not discouraged and it's not encouraged really. It's up to each individual player, and it usually depends on the emotion of the occasion. So obviously the Champions League final was very emotional, and you're prone to be more honest. Whereas if you've just lost away in the Premier League and it means you stay in sixth place rather than you're less likely to be that emotional. I think players it's droned into them to be robotic, because if they're not, they get criticised more often than not. They just put themselves out there to be criticised if they show a lot of personality. So often, as soon as the camera switches on, I've seen players just drain all their personality out, throw out the answers that they know will get them through it, and then as soon as they're back off camera, they're just happily and bubbly and their normal selves again, because it's easier for them, to be honest.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a good time for us to wrap up this week's episode. Thanks again to Calum for appearing this week, and thank you all for tuning in to this week's Why Football podcast. Please do not forget to follow us at @YFootball_ on Twitter. Please also follow and subscribe with us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Acast for immediate access to future episodes. Cheers, guys, and we'll see you next week.